Hello, Confidant community. Welcome to the live. As you know, if you've been on this journey with me before, you know the show is all about making financial conversations accessible, and today will be no different. And we are right now listening to the sounds of Georgia Smith. I don't know if you know this song, Christine.
It's beautiful.
She's pretty great. The song is actually called The Greatest Gift, which I thought was interesting. How many of you know this song? I asked our guest if she knows it, but maybe you do. You know I love pretending to be the DJ on this show. Anyway, as I said, I love showcasing music on this show. And this song actually spoke to me because I thought it'd be a great intro for what we're going to talk about today. And okay, I actually thought, what a great intro for this particular topic today, because it's talking about the greatest gift. And I thought, okay, that's kind of, what we feel when we find our person, right? When we find that person, it feels like a very special gift. And I know that right now, for so many women, it's really hard to find and connect with a partner. Let's not lose sight of that. It's challenging. In fact, what I hear from my female clients who aren't in a relationship is dating in 2024 can be quite soul numbing. So you're shaking your head. So when you actually find someone you connect with, it can be quite magical. The flip side of that actually is finding your person and building a life together can often be where the rubber hits the road for a lot of people. So everything's great until you move in together, start, leaving the socks all around the apartment or house and start sharing bills, living together, right? And you're laughing because you remember all this stuff, don't you, Christine?
Yep.
Yeah, the honeymoon actually tends to be over at that point when you have to figure out, who's going to pay what bill and who's going to do what chore, right? And I think for a woman who is the breadwinner, these conversations can actually be even more challenging. For example, society and your partner might actually expect that you're going to still be the person to take care of the home, the children, and still be the breadwinner. So I have a fun little fact to share with you. And if you're a Gen Xer born either during my time, which is Gen X, or before, you might recall this commercial. And it goes like this. I'll bring home the bacon. I'll fry it up in the pan, and I'll never, ever forget, you're my man, and you're the man. I think it's you're the man. You're the man. Anyway, do any of you remember what this particular advertiser was selling? If you do, post in the chat. What were they singing when they were singing about a woman bringing home the bacon? And this is back in the 70s, frying it up and still never forgetting, you're the man. I mean, honestly. So anyway, I say this because navigating finances, as I mentioned, is very challenging when you're the breadwinner and really not as easy as this commercial suggests. So anyway, if you remember the name of this commercial, post it in the chat. To help us navigate this subject matter, I've got Christine Bies, who's the founder and CEO of Untangle Money. Christine, I saw you shaking your head as we were talking about all of these issues. Really, we have so much to talk about today. So welcome to the live and let's get into it.
Thank you for having me, Jackie. I'm so excited to be here.
Thanks for jamming with me as well. So let's start off with some common challenges that women might face when they earn more in relationships. What do you think about that? What would be some of the common ones that you see?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said, research even backs up that even though we are earning more, or even if we're the breadwinner in the family, we often are still taking on the lion's share of the work at home. And so that can really, when you're doing full full scale on the home front and the work front, it can lead to burnout. And it can also lead to some discomfort around, gender roles, the gender norms, and sort of the sense of equality and fairness in a relationship. Even when we are the breadwinner and we are earning these high paid salaries, women still under earn their male counterparts in that sphere. So even when we're breaking through the glass ceiling, we are still being undervalued, and the pay gap is actually bigger the higher up you go. So at the CEO level, it's wider than what we see at the entry level, which is like 83 cents on the dollars. I think the one that we hear most quoted now, but it can be 30-40% when you get up onto these higher levels. So in the law field, we see a big gap. In medical fields, we see a big gap. People with MBAs, there's a big gap after 5 years. People with engineering degrees, big gap after 5 years. And so, you can still face these things.
If you're a CEO or lawyer, potentially, you could be earning 70 cents on the dollar.
Yeah, 60 cents on the dollar. Yeah.
Or even 60 versus, a dollar. So I'm supposed to, according to this song, bring the bacon home, which is less bacon, and still fry it up in the pan.
And so I think there can be this sense of, unfairness in the workforce, right? You feel like you're undervalued and under-recognized compared to some of the male counterparts that you're surrounded by, even though you're really successful. And then you come home and you feel like this inequity in your homework, this unpaid work, this mental load. And I think that can just be really trying. And I think also women, we tend to be pretty good at EQ. And I think we are told about the male fragile ego. And I know we were talking about this earlier. I sometimes wonder if this isn't overplayed. Like, men can do really hard things. I'm not sure are we protecting them from something that doesn't exist, or is it a real concern? And I think I see it both ways. I think sometimes it really is a concern. And then sometimes I think, some of us are in relationships that are a little more enlightened, a little more forward thinking, and it isn't something that we have to worry about. But it is definitely a sensitivity that we hear women talk about when they are the breadwinner. So it can be hard to understand what it's supposed to look like if you happen to be earning more than your husband in a partnership, in a male woman partnership.
Yeah, and as you say that, I think a few things. One is it because society tells us so often that we need to protect the male's fragile ego? So that's one piece. And I just think about how much weight that puts on someone who, we just talked about, she's bringing home less bacon, she's still frying it. I love this analogy. Yeah. And then she's coming home and she might be dealing with some of the same inequities in that relationship, and how that weighs on her mentally and weighs on her maybe from a health standpoint, potentially.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And how that could, kind of have all of this underlying conflict going on.
Yes. Yeah. And hopefully, one thing I just thought of right now is, hopefully if you are earning a lot of money, you can also hire in some of that support, right? And not that your partner shouldn't be helping out. That's not what I mean to say. I'm just, sometimes we can look at a situation in an ideal way, and we can look at it also in like, okay, here's where we are, what can we change? And so maybe there's a way we can buy some of that help. But again, we have less money to start with. And so that can be frustrating when you just want people to help you out a bit more. And these are deeply ingrained tropes and deeply ingrained like gender norms, gender roles. So it can be hard. It's really hard as a person to navigate it individually.
Well, you say that, and I just think to myself, let's ask the Confidant community. I'd love for you to post in the chat, Confidant community, how are you the breadwinner in your relationship? And if you are, how do you deal with like household chores? Are you throwing money at the problem? Or are like, that's how I see it. And maybe if you're dealing with someone like myself, you're budgeting for throwing money at the problem, like vis-a-vis hiring help and putting like a cleaning person, still a cleaning lady, FYI, Confidant community, but cleaning person into your budget to pay for these services.
Yeah.
So would love for you to post in the chat. Love your feedback on that, Confidant community.
And then I think that, something that can help when we have sort of a different point of view on whose roles are what within a relationship, it's often good to bring in like a coach or a mediator or a counselor, someone who can who can make the fighting fair. And so this is actually something my husband and I do. And I do it to protect my husband from me, because I fight dirty and I don't mean to.
So sweet.
Right? You would think. But I just, I go for, I'm just, I don't know. I feel caged and cornered, and I feel like I'm coming from a position of weakness. And so I lash out, and it's not something I appreciate about myself. So whenever we know there's a sensitive conversation, and there was always some hanging around, we do it in front of like a mediator, and that keeps the fight fair, or it keeps it conversational, it keeps it open, it keeps it positive, it doesn't allow it to get into this spiral of like, not, and it's just garbage, right? For us anyways, for me, it just becomes this garbage. It ends up being about the towels, and you started talking about bacon, right? Like you end up, and so I think that's a really neat way. And then there's also some good books I can talk about as well to help.
Yeah, please share those resources, because I was going to say, if we factor in the three things, the fragile ego, a woman earning less and having still the pressures at work, and then coming home and having all these additional home responsibilities, that could bubble up when you feel mentally stressed and physically tapped down, that it's easy to get into conflict. And what I'm hearing from you is, get that therapist. I see that person as a referee. So when you have that point of view, that might be, this is how I feel. And that person that you picked, your person, remember that person, that gift, the greatest gift we were just talking about? That may not feel so great when, again, the socks are everywhere or the dishes are in the sink. Then you're like, you know what, maybe learning how to fight fair in a relationship is so important.
Yeah. And it's about different frame of reference. And sometimes, you can have two different points of view that are both valid, right? And it's sort of it's taking the emotions or de-escalating the emotions so that you can hear your partner's point of view. I think that's what really helps for me. And then vice versa, I can then communicate in a way where I feel heard, because sometimes that's where I come from. I'm like, I feel like you're not listening to me. So for me and my partner, it works really well.
Yeah, I was just listening to a podcast the other day, and they were talking about the importance of fighting fair and fighting healthily and using a referee. And I certainly know that when we have, very challenging financial conversations with couples we deal with, we're kind of like the financial therapist, right?
Yes.
And one of the things they talked about is, in popular culture, we're using gaslighting, the whole term gaslighting, the wrong way, which I thought was really interesting. Like, confidant community, you're probably using it in conversation with your partner, and hey, no shame, no blame. But what I understood from the counselor was, gaslighting from the movie Gaslight is really more about manipulating somebody in a very sinister way, where you make them feel like they're crazy. Versus if you and I, like you just mentioned, Christine, that, I'm in a scenario where I'm already feeling vulnerable and put upon because of all of the patriarchy, and I earn more, and there's no way to navigate these conversations easily with my partner. My point of view, the person I choose, has their point of view. I might not even be communicating or know what the tools are to communicate this inequity. And so I end up saying something that might not be that great, but it's from my perspective. They have their own perspective, but their perspective, whatever it may be, isn't gaslighting. It's their perspective. To know what the difference between somebody having their point of view and them trying to be defensive, and them defending themselves and feeling hurt, or the conflict and self-preservation, then from the difference between that and gaslighting.
Well, so one of the books that Fair Play, I think this is a fairly well-known book by Eve Rodsky. She talks about all of the mental load. So like all of the unseen tasks that have to be done, which are largely borne by women in most relationships, and so she actually writes them all down. And her point is that your partner doesn't know everything that you do. And so they don't necessarily realize how much more work you're doing, because some of it's not even physical labor that you can see, it's unseen. So she has this thing where there's like a card for every single task, and there's blank ones, but there's like the standard ones, and then you divide them between the partners, and they describe the activity in the book. But that's a really neat way for your partner to maybe appreciate better some of the things that maybe they don't realize is happening.
Because it
And
might
then,
be invisible, right? If you come home
yeah,
and the dishes are done and the kids are clean, it's
but you
just
still have
like
to plan
that's your
for the birthday.
reality.
Yeah, but then there's a birthday party to plan. There's like, what activities are they gonna do. So that stuff may not feel, and sometimes when you think about it, I mean, I do this all the time. I'm like, this is gonna take me 3 minutes. And then half an hour later, I'm yelling at the intake form because it's not accepting my payment, or it just, and things take longer. So I think that's a really neat way of making the invisible visible, and also having the piles, kind of can show the imbalance. The other book that's great is Couples That Work. And it talks about how to navigate, career paths within a couple, and how there's sort of 3 or 4 distinct phases that most couples go through that you really need to negotiate. One is around children. So not everybody's going to have that one, but I found it really interesting the way she talks, and she's very graceful of how she deals with couples. So those are 2 books I would recommend on the topic.
Awesome. I was going to say, so Confidant Community, we're going to have those books, those resources for you so that you know how to fight fair. Conflict is normal. It's healthy. It's just how to do it that, up levels your relationship versus, down levels or devolves your relationship. I think that's really important. Or you might want to throw money at it.
Yes.
And, really hire some cleaner to help with things around the house or things that need to be done in the house, just to take some of that load off. And then talk to a planner, see if you can budget that in. That's one of the things I'm hearing. And maybe therapy, like an actual ref to help get your point out and have that person's point heard, without either of you, not like talking over each other or attacking each other, and really getting to the heart of what you need to get done with, right? To keep the special gift that you received.
Yeah.
So you mentioned something that I think is really important as well, when we were talking about, the books and some of the different financial goals people might have, like having children. So let's talk a little bit about, having a child. Often, some of the things we've talked about in earlier podcasts on this subject is women tend to, these days, higher earning women are actually in school longer, then they're, starting their careers later and having children later. So one of the things that a breadwinner has to think about even before entering a relationship is, do I want to have kids, and how do I save for kids?
Yeah. And, one of the things that happens when you have kids at a later age is it's not always as easy to have children. So sometimes you need interventions like IVF, and sometimes you need several rounds of IVF. So that can also be really expensive. Plus, if you're the breadwinner, you want to figure out what your maternity benefits might be. Is there a top up? Is there EI? Are you going to need to compensate for that, or top that up yourself? I think most of the women I've talked to have found that EI is certainly not enough, and the top up from the company runs out a lot quicker than they expected. And then there's a negotiation with your partner, how long, and yourself. I think both are important. How long are you going to take off? How long is your partner going to take off? How do you want to divide that? What is emotionally important to you, and what is financially important to you? And so this is one of those inflection points we see where, going in, maybe retirement was the penultimate thing that people wanted, really 55,
Right.
I'm 55 and like, I'm going to yacht all year or cruise all year. And then you have a child, and, these things become more expensive. And so suddenly you see this shift in expectation, or even what you want for yourself in retirement. You think, okay, well, this was more expensive now, so I'm going to have less later. So I can either retire a bit later to compensate and still have the nice life, or I can, change the way I want to live. So
I want a child. So the priority is I want a child, and I'm going to budget for IVF. And, Confidant Community, one of the things I'd love to know is, did you budget for something like IVF? Is that something that was in your budget as you, realized that you were going to be starting your career later? How did you pay for it? Did you have a health plan that helped pay for it? Did you and your partner split the cost of this, or did you do this on your own? Would love, post in the chat. I'd love to get the comment on that. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and the great thing is, as society is moving on, there are some places have OHIP coverage. There are some more affordable ways to do it if you haven't pre-planned as much as you would have liked. But it's a really expensive endeavor. The costs are coming down a little, but it's still same as a bathroom renovation.
Yeah, well, that's a really good way of putting it. And anybody
Yeah.
who's done a bath, always put a little bit more, like 30% more away for that IVF treatment, and
Yeah.
recognize that if these are some of the things you're saving for ahead of going on mat leave, then the thorny conversation becomes, how much time are you going to take off? If you're the higher income earner, you're a business owner, maybe you're a CEO at a company or a founder of a company. How much time are you going to take off, especially if your partner earns less?
Yeah.
And how do you navigate that conversation?
Mm-hmm.
That's just a lot of things to discuss. And it might mean doing the math and saying, can I even afford it? Like, is it even an option? Maybe it's like, honey, how we live and where we live will mean after 4 months, I'm going to need to go back to work. But guess what? It's 2024 and there's pat leave. This is
yes, it is so exciting. It's so exciting. And, and the costs don't stop there. Kids are kind of like a sailboat. The original, like the purchase, the IVF is just the beginning.
Take it from Christine. She's not 3. She knows she's an expert.
Yeah, but it's your fixed costs are going to go up. You're going to have childcare needs and have babysitting needs. You're also going to maybe want to save for an RESP and other things like that. So it's even as you're thinking of having children, if this is something that's happening later or whenever it's happening, you don't need new equipment, right? Cribs and all these gizmos and gadgets. It's a good practice to start thinking about how you want to work that into a financial plan, so that I think it's about managing your expectations and also having those conversations about who's going to pay for it ahead of time, so that you're not left sitting there at the moment, like you want a crib and it's expensive and your partner's like, well, I'm not going to pay for that. And you're just like, well, I guess I'm paying for it. Right. So you just want to make sure you understand, are you going to go pro rata? Is it going to be like a share of your income? Is it going to be 50-50? Managing these expectations and preparing for some of these costs and getting a ballpark sense of, what it's going to be, it can really help. And on the high income earner part, if you are going to do IVF, it is a lot of time. And so sometimes, depending on how you're compensated, if you're compensated by your hours in, it can cause a bit of a drag on your income because you're not able to work and receive compensation for some of those hours, and your mood might be off and you may have low energy. So always preparing in advance is helpful to just not throw money at problems that are, or to have the money to throw out the problems when they come up.
Yeah. And it sounds like being prepared, right? So I've had conversations with these breadwinners who they're looking at, even before the partner comes in, putting money away for IVF treatment, right? And then the partner comes in and they're having conversations about how they're going to do things. Yeah. The reality is, like, even before you get to the point where you're like, that's your person, it's really about having those conversations about what your life will look like. Best case scenarios around, okay, this is what we're going to do, IVF, and we're going to have kids. Who's going to take time off? Sharing, what your income is. Like, once you decide that's your person, you really want to know what the situation will be like. If you're in a living situation, get as close to what that reality looks like as possible.
Yes.
So that the answer that they give you in that scenario helps to dictate if that truly is your greatest gift.
Yeah.
So you want to close that package and put it aside and see what else is under the tree for next year. Right?
Yeah. And so most high income earning women that we work with, or most breadwinner women that we work with, they tend to have very supportive partners. And I know that some people say it's the most expensive decision you're ever going to make is picking your partner. But I do want to give a bit of grace and say that, we are all changing as people, and we all have changing needs. And sometimes our person isn't perfect. And so you just have to figure out what is table stakes for you, like what is a non-negotiable, and the rest is kind of negotiable. But from my lens, which is highly skewed towards financial planning, I think it's very nice when people are aligned on how they view and envision money and what they want for themselves in the future. We very rarely align exactly, but we often find people, if we talk about it, we often find people are in the same broad category as us or very different from us. And so if you're together, that's a little easier if you're in the same category. When you're very different, that requires a lot of communication and a lot more negotiation. So it's just, I don't want to say, you should have known, because there's so many other things, right? The socks,
Yes,
all these
exactly.
other things you need to look at.
The
And
shrinking of my really good, my really good mohair sweater. So yeah, we could be done based on these things, confidant community. Like, get
yes,
this right, or else it's really going to annoy me. But yeah,
yes,
and yeah, the shine comes off, right? But
yeah,
in a nutshell, I think what I'm hearing from you is choose your person wisely, but don't expect them to be perfect, because everybody's got flaws. So
yeah,
I think that's definitely advice we can take to the bank. Now, I have another question
yeah,
around this, which is expenses, because we've been talking around expenses. So
yeah.
we've been actually having this conversation about expenses, and is fair equal when it comes to expenses? So should it be 50-50? If, Christine, you make 200,000 and I make 50, how's this going to work? Square the circle here.
Yeah. So I think a lot of
You love me
people
because I'm awesome.
yeah. Well, but I think people often feel 50-50 is fair. And this is the most common division we see, but we do see a lot of, one person earning a lot more than the other.
Right.
And what I think, and controversially, I think it should be pro rata. I think if you earn more, you should pay more.
Right.
And I just think that's part of being in a partnership. You don't have to think that. I do not judge people with 50-50. It's just my personal, what I think is fair. And so clearly that's
so practically speaking, then how would we set that up? I earn 50,
yeah.
you earn 200. Do we set up a joint account?
Yes.
What goes into the account? How do we navigate for, right now, like if we started off in 2020, let's say we met and fell in love in 2020 when things were cheaper. It was so much easier to be in love in 2020.
Yeah. There was more money to do stuff with.
Well, we weren't going anywhere. We weren't doing anything. So a lot of money we were saving. We were just at home together. If we liked each other, then that worked out really well. We didn't spend any money. But now we're back out on the road together, and it's really expensive. So, I'm putting in the same amount of money, but, I'm going to groceries, buying groceries that are costing more. I'm paying for gas, and you're still expecting us to split everything? Like, how is that going to work?
Well, so I think you need a bit of a slush fund too, right? Like in there, I'd put 1 month's salary, like take home salary, 1 month for each of you in there. That could work as a bit of your emergency account. It can be just your float. And then I think you each, so that's the base. And then you each contribute, I don't know, it depends on your fixed costs, but like, let's say 50% of the take home income. So the person who makes more would put more in, 50% each of their take home income to cover the, mortgage, the bills, the blah, blah, blah. And then also you have your variable costs like groceries and utilities and things like that. So that comes, that gets spent from that account, but you're each putting the same percentage of your salary in there, not the same dollar amount.
Right.
The person who makes more puts in more, but it's the same percentage. And that way, and then there will be some negotiation, right? Because what if one of us really likes going on fancy trips and one of us is more of an Econo Lodge fan?
Yes, that's what I was going to get to next. Is I'm the vacation person. My partner, again, let's say he earns 50,000 and I earn 200. And I want to go to the Hyatt on a really beautiful vacation, but he can only afford the Econo Lodge.
Yeah.
Like, what's that going to look like? Because I'm not prepared to do the Econo Lodge.
Exactly. Well, I'm going to bring in a visual aid.
Because lifestyle is important.
So let's pretend this is the couple's take-home income. And so we have debt, we have our cost of living. That could be Netflix, it could be rent, it could be mortgage. It's just you've spent it before you've gotten out of bed. So it's a fixed cost. Then maybe you need a savings account. This is what you're putting towards retirement. And flex money is what you spend on food, clothes, gifts, all the things and everything else. So that's about, it depends. It can be, there's a range, but needs to be.
We're going to need your chart, Christine.
Yeah. You need at least 18% in here. Otherwise you're going to go into debt, which is a really fun fact. But so in that flex money, right? That is what you also need to find joy from that. You have to get joy from that money, or we go into debt. We end up revenge spending. This isn't you. It's research shows it's human. Most of us will do this, right? Monks, maybe not, but everybody else will. And so if you're the person who gets a lot of joy from traveling, maybe you negotiate in your relationship that you're gonna pony up more, and you're gonna be the one that pays the difference between an Econo Lodge and a Hilton, right? You're gonna pay that difference because it's gonna bring you outsized joy, because that's what works for you, and financially that's what's available to you. Maybe the other person really likes music, and they're gonna spend a disproportionate amount of their flex money on musical and concerts and things that bring them joy, and they're going to take you along because maybe it's, I know you like music was a bad example, but something else, right? So how can you treat your partner while filling up your cup without it costing them more than they'd like to spend? So, and just being conscientious and protecting their joy and your joy so that you feel like you're taken care of. I think that's often missing from conversation.
I think that's probably the big thing I see is people who are the women who are the high or income earner feel like they're not taken care of. Like they, all of a sudden now they might be in that role of taking care of someone else, which, makes them feel quite vulnerable. So what I'm hearing, practically speaking, is this the money? So 50%, I'm putting my 50% of what's going into our joint account.
That covers this stuff.
Okay, so then
all the fixed costs and a little bit for food, because food is hard. It goes up and down a lot. So we do want to cover a little bit extra for food, but that's usually not so much of that.
So what am I putting 50 as a base, and then we'll put the extra 20 you were talking about?
It'll be different per couple, but it depends on, like, some people have committed money up to here. Some people have a really like inexpensive cost of living, so their committed money is really small. Just depends. So this is very generic, and it'll be different per person. But you want to cover all of your fixed costs, so all your rent, utilities, taxes, like property taxes, like things that Netflix, any of your own subscriptions will come out of here. But
what I'm saying is that though the joint, like, are we putting all of that in a joint account?
I would put all of the joint ones in the joint account. So you need to know what you're paying for before you know how much to put in. But when you look at that number, then you figure out what it is, and then you figure out what is that in an equal percentage. So maybe it's 60%, maybe it's 30%. I don't necessarily know. Roughly it's around 60% for most couples.
Right.
Between 50 and 60%. So that was just why I picked that number. Okay. And then you want to add a little bit more for groceries, just because they tend to fluctuate a lot. And the person who is paying for the groceries can often get cash crunched, right? If often we see this division, like one couple pays for like all this expense that just is the same every month, but say mortgage, right? And the other person pays for groceries, or it's probably not quite right, but the person with the groceries, it goes up and down so much, and like maybe you have a birthday, so it's going to be higher, or you're throwing a party, so it's going to be higher, and that person, usually the woman, ends up cash crunched, right? So they end up having much less ability to plan for their money, and they end up cash short a lot of the time. And it's a lot easier to pay for a steady stream than it is to pay for a variable cost. So that's why I just add in the groceries into the slush fund.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking, so it sounds like to me, if we're splitting expenses, factoring in that I might have, a lifestyle I want to keep up based on being the higher income earner, and in this case, the spouse or partner might have an income and a lifestyle they're used to based on being a lower income earner, we need to create a joint account where we figure out all our expenses and put a percentage based on our, like 50% of what my income is. And then that's what we're drawing from for those expenses. Yep. And then whatever we have left, we can use for our own separate account and build that up. Yes. But it's figuring out what we're going to put joint together, where we both feel like we're contributing and also not feeling taken advantage of.
Yes. And I think sometimes when we map them out and we're very explicit, and we can even do line items, right? Like, and then that way you can say to your partner, well, I'm not really the one who enjoys X. And they can say to you, I'm not the one who really enjoys Y. And so, that way you could say, okay, well, in that case, this expense, I'm going to pay most of it or all of it, depending on, do you get, how you want to do that. But for the ones that are joint, when you can see it and you can say, okay, I'm going to pay the equal percentage to you of my salary, then we're paying, it feels the same to us. And so that's a way to talk about it. The other thing, I think, as couples, when we have a framework and we have laid it all out, it's a lot easier to talk about, and it's a lot easier to have these conversations in a way that's not coming from emotions. And there's nothing wrong with emotions. They tell us when we think we're wrong, right? Emotionally, I like, oh, we don't need to spend that. And you're like, emotionally, you want to spend that. And so that's an important signal. But when we see it laid out, it can help remove some of those emotions so that you can have a constructive conversation. And then you can use the emotions as more of an indicator of importance to you and less of an indicator of, anxiety or overwhelm, or I
Yeah,
don't feel like you're hearing me, or I don't feel like you think I'm special anymore.
yeah, no, I think you make some good points, because I think what happens is people kind of go to their most vulnerable place of fear and anxiety or whatever money means to them. So if all of a sudden the person is shaming them because, they, like myself, I want to go to a nice vacation. You're like, oh, you're wasting money,
Yeah.
but hey, that's my money to waste.
Yeah.
Right. Or I'm like, I don't value what they're spending money on. I'm like, oh, but you spend all these little silly things.
Yeah.
That might be, that's what they can afford, and that's their joy. So
Yeah.
nobody wants to be the killjoy, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? But at the same time, we want to honor that we might not necessarily make the same money, but where we share values, we want to, like, zero in on that and double down on that. And where we have different values, we want to compensate and help everybody so that they feel valued.
Yeah.
Right. So,
and I will attribute the 33% rule to this. Usually these kind of things work for a third of people.
right.
If it doesn't work, take what works, leave the rest.
Yeah, I think it's the most important thing about that confidant community is, how can you have conversations with your partner where you're not blaming or shaming? And if you need support, again, that financial referee, like a financial planner, or that emotional referee, like a therapist, or books or tools, like figuring out how to do things where you're building on the magic of that relationship and feeling everybody feeling seen and heard, and that you're supporting the relationship that you've built, right?
Yeah. And so I'm going to use another visual aid, but this is retirement planning. And so this is the money you're putting in. Mm-hmm. This is the money growing for you. This is the little gray part is what you need, but this person fell short. And then this is you using up the money in retirement. There are a lot of ways to make this picture work, and they have a lot of impact on our day-to-day budget. And it's important to have some of these conversations with a financial professional so they can help you understand the trade-offs between putting more money away today, getting your money to work harder, not wanting to put it away into as high-risk portfolio, and making other trade-offs. So I think it's just nice to be clear, and clear is kind. And I think that helps with the communication.
Yeah, absolutely. Because retirement, which we haven't talked about yet, that was actually where I was going to go next. And we're going to definitely, confidant community, share some of Christine's resources that she's been holding up that you might not be able to see if you're me and you have really bad vision. So anyway, don't worry, we've got you. So let's talk about retirement and tax plans. How would you address or even plan for people who have income disparities? For something like retirement?
Well, actually, you shared some really good guidance on, spousal pensions or spousal RSPs and income splitting and things like that. Really making the pie larger by making the taxes lower and sharing the resources. I think that's such a clever way to sort of even things out and be able to enjoy retirement together. One of the things I really focus on is, what kind of retirement do you want? And is that similar to your partner or different from your partner? And then how do you make it work? Because it impacts a lot of choices, how much money you have to spend today, how much money you need to put away. And so I think, especially when you're the higher earner, if you're putting most of the money away, how do you feel about that? Does that feel like you're being taken advantage of? Or does that feel like, oh, I can help us provide this great future for us? And I think those are important emotions. That's important self-talk. Again, a counselor or a financial planner can help guide you with that stuff. I think anytime we can economize the taxes we spend, I personally really like spending, or I like the fact that I can contribute to society. So I think that's something I wish more people felt. And at the same time, I don't need to pay more than I need to. And there's a reason there's tax splitting, because of income discrepancies, to make it a little more even if there's two of you and not just one of you.
Exactly, because that's, to me, one of the ways you can make, fair more equal is, leveraging the fact that you do have an income disparity to reduce how much taxes you pay as a couple and have more money for the things that you want. So there are ways, even if you're not making the same amount of income, that you can, leverage, make the most, be opportunistic about that circumstance. So you end up with more money in your pocket as a couple, which, kind of helps. I had one actual breadwinner say to me, she was the person who made $1 million. Her husband was at home. And yeah, her husband didn't work. He was at home. And I remember when he received a fairly sizable inheritance from his mother, and they still had quite a bit of debt, but he didn't want to use the money that he got from his parent to pay off any of the debt. And I asked her how she felt about it. And she said, and this is what I mean about, having therapy and understanding your partner's point of view. She said, it's not because he doesn't want me to have it. It's just he's never had money of his own before. And his parents, because they passed away and they were such good stewards, he just wants to make sure he takes care of that money.
So nice.
So it's just being able to kind of understand your partner, which is that whole gaslighting thing.
Yes.
Understand who you're actually with, because they've been together since they were in university. So it's not like she's like, oh, he's just come into my life yesterday and now he's like trying to. So it's just really understanding who you're dealing with and figuring out if you guys are on the same page and you share the same vision, making sure that you look out for each other financially, but also look out for yourself.
Well, and also that I can imagine, when you are the stay-at-home person, I mean, often it's the role reversal. Sometimes it feels like your emergency fund, or it can feel like, there is no other way for you to earn any income because you're not in the paid workforce. You're just in unpaid workforce. And so, it can feel like the scarcity. It sounded like it wasn't, but it feels scarce. Scarcity emotions don't necessarily have to be like logical. Thank you. Right. Yeah. Like it could be a lot of money, but you can still have scarcity around it. So I can understand from some points of view why that would feel that way, right? Like this might be my only chance to have my own money, and I'm not sure what to do with it. I like that. That wasn't where I thought that was going to go. So
no, that's what she said, and I was like, okay, I respect that, because I was pushing back a bit and wanting to make sure we really address that. But that's fair. So that, and I was like, okay, fair. And so I think it's really important to just understand, each other and each other's point of view. And if you need support in that way, I see Jody's already put our information in the chat. And we also will be sharing the resources that Christine talked about today. I can't believe our time has come to an end, Christine. It's come so fast. But I wanted to say, Confidant Community, if you want to learn more about how to make the most of your finances as a couple while ensuring that you're securing your bag in case things don't work out as planned, we've got you. So, these are some of the conversations, as I talked about earlier, that we're having with our clients every day. Jody is on this live. She's put her information in the chat so she can set up a 30-minute confidential call. So Confidant Community, if you enjoyed this live, if you have a question, please do not keep us a secret. Please like or share or comment. We would really appreciate it. We've been talking actually all month about how high earning women can, secure their bag and build a new love. But if you missed any of these lives, we'll be sharing the top tips from the live we just had with Christine on Sunday. So check it out. So we'll share it with you as well, Christine. So look out for it. And thank you again, Christine, for turning up on this live today and providing so much wealth of information. We'd love to have you again. How can people get a hold of you if they need to?
Yeah, we're at Untangle Money on most socials. So all roads eventually lead to me. You can also email me at christine@untangle.money.
Awesome. And we will share all of that in the live summary as well. So folks, as you heard, love and money is a great combo when you can find it. But you know what? We're not done yet. There's been so much to talk about on this subject. So stay tuned. We're going to have more on the subject next month. So see you next month. This is our last live of the month. See you soon, Confidant Community. Take care. Bye, everybody.
Bye.